You saw the title and you already know the feeling. That slow ache in your wallet every time the car goes into the shop. That little voice that whispers you are being charged for something you could have done yourself. Well, I lived among the people who almost never pay it. For 3 years, I lived in a quiet neighborhood in Japan, and I watched ordinary people keep their cars running clean and rust-free for 20 years and more. Not with fancy tools, with small habits. And by the end of this, I will hand you the one rust trick a mechanic in Niigata showed me on a snowy morning that I have never seen in any manual sold in the West. It works on the car sitting in your driveway right now. I want to be honest with you before I go any further. I was a skeptic, a loud one. Back home, I was the man who traded in a car the moment the warning light blinked, who believed that a vehicle was a disposable thing you rented from the bank and threw away after 7 years. I paid the dealer whatever they asked because I assumed the modern car was too complicated for a normal person to touch. I laughed at people who fussed over oil and tire pressure. I thought they were wasting their evenings. Then I moved into a small rental house on a narrow street outside the city, and my landlord, an old man named Mr. Tanaka, changed the way I see machines forever. He was 71 years old when I met him. His car was a plain white sedan, nothing special, the kind of car nobody looks at twice. But that car was 19 years old, and it looked and sounded like it had rolled off the lot the week before. No rust, no rattle. The paint still had depth to it. I assumed he had money hidden away, that he simply replaced parts constantly. I was wrong. He spent almost nothing. What he had instead was a set of habits so quiet, so ordinary, that they had become invisible even to him. The first morning I really paid attention. It was cold, and I did what every person I grew up with does. I started my car and let it sit and idle in the driveway for 10 minutes to warm up. Mister, Tanaka walked over, and in his gentle way he asked me why I was burning fuel to heat a car that was going nowhere. I told him you have to warm the engine before you drive it. He shook his head slowly. He told me the engine warms 3 times faster when the car is moving under a light load, and that sitting still, cold, actually washes the oil off the cylinder walls and leaves fuel pooling where it does damage. I did not believe him, so I looked it up the way a stubborn man does when he wants to prove an old neighbor wrong. And the engineers agreed with him, not with me. A modern engine idling in place stays cold far longer, dumps extra fuel to keep running, and that raw fuel actually thins the oil film that protects the metal. The right way, the way Mr. Tanaka drove for 50 years, is to start the car, wait maybe 30 seconds for the oil pressure to come up, and then drive gently for the first few minutes. No hard acceleration, no high engine speed, just easy motion. The engine reaches its working temperature quickly, and every part warms together instead of fighting each other. That was the first crack in my certainty. If I had been wrong about something that basic for my entire adult life, what else had I been getting wrong? A lot, as it turned out. Because the second thing he taught me was about the tires, and it saved me more than I ever expected. I had always checked my tire pressure warm, after driving, at the gas station, because that was convenient. He told me to check them cold, first thing in the morning before the car had moved, when the air inside had settled overnight. Warm air expands and lies to you. A tire that reads correct when hot can be dangerously low when cold, and he ran his tires just slightly firmer than the sticker suggested. Not much, just a touch, because in his experience it cut fuel use and made the tread wear flat and even instead of cupping at the edges. I started doing it. My tires lasted noticeably longer. My fuel gauge dropped slower. Such a small thing. Such a foolish thing to have never known. But here is where the story turns, and where I need you to stay with me, because the small habits were only the surface. The deeper I looked, the more I realized these people were not simply careful. They were the inheritors of an entire national philosophy about machines that the rest of us were never taught, and there is a reason we were never taught it. Let me tell you about a law. In 1951, Japan passed something called the Road Transport Vehicle Act, and out of it grew a system every Japanese driver knows by a single word: shaken. It is a mandatory deep inspection every car must pass, once when it is 3 years old, and then every 2 years after that. It is strict, it is expensive, and at first glance it sounds like a burden nobody would want. When I first heard about it, I felt sorry for the people who had to deal with it, but living there changed my mind completely because I watched what that system did to the culture around it. When a nation forces every citizen to prove their car is genuinely sound every 2 years, something happens over the decades. People stop treating maintenance as an emergency and start treating it as a rhythm. Fathers teach sons, neighbors teach neighbors, and a huge body of small, practical, homemade knowledge grows up around keeping a car healthy between inspections, so the inspection is never a shock. Now here is the part that made me angry once I understood it. Back home, we were raised in the opposite system on purpose. We were raised to believe the car is a mystery box that only the dealer can open. We were raised to replace instead of maintain, to trade in instead of care for, to fear the machine instead of understanding it. That belief did not appear by accident. It is enormously profitable for the people who sell new cars and the people who sell repairs when you believe you are helpless. Every year the average person keeps a car longer is a year the industry loses money. So the quiet knowledge that keeps a car alive for 20 years was never hidden in a vault. It was simply never handed to us. It was allowed to fade. Mr. Tanaka handed it to me anyway, one habit at a time, and I am going to hand it to you. Take the engine oil. I used to check mine wherever, whenever, on whatever slope the car happened to be parked on, and I trusted the reading. He taught me to check it on level ground with the engine cold or after sitting several minutes so the oil has drained back down, and to wipe the dipstick, reinsert it fully, and only then read it. A slanted driveway can hide a quart low or show you full when you are not. And he changed his oil not by the panicked warning light, but by a steady, sensible interval, and he always felt the old oil between his fingers as it drained. Gritty meant something was wearing. A burnt smell meant it had run too hot. That oil was a report card, and he read it every single time. Then came the fuel tank, and this one genuinely surprised me. Mr. Tanaka almost never let his tank drop below half. I assumed he was just cautious about running out. He wasn't. He explained that an empty space inside a fuel tank fills with air, and air carries moisture, and when the temperature swings between day and night, that moisture condenses into tiny droplets of water on the inside of the tank. Over years, that water breeds rust inside the tank and gets pulled into the fuel system. Keeping the tank fuller means less air, less moisture, less rust. In a humid country, that habit alone can save a fuel pump. I have kept my tank above half ever since, and I will never go back. Therefore, once I understood that they treated the car as something to be preserved rather than consumed, every other habit started to make sense, and I began collecting them like a man who had found buried treasure in plain sight. The lug nuts, for instance. I had watched shop workers rattle them on with an air gun in a lazy circle. Mr. Tanaka tightened his in a star pattern, crossing from one side to the opposite side, snugging them in stages rather than all the way at once. He told me this pulls the wheel down flat and even against the hub, so it seats true and does not warp under the pressure. A wheel tightened lopsided can crack a brake rotor over time and make the whole front end shudder. Such a simple order of operations, and yet nobody had ever shown me. The brakes taught me patience. I was a rider of brakes, a man who kept a foot hovering, who slowed down by pressing the pedal every time. He drove differently. He read the road far ahead and lifted off the gas early, letting the engine itself slow the car down, using the brakes only for the final stop. Engine braking, they call it. His brake pads lasted more than twice as long as mine ever had, and his brake fluid stayed clean because it never boiled from constant heat. I thought it was just old man caution. It was actually decades of understanding that every part you use gently is a part you rarely replace. And if you want to go deeper into all of this before we continue, I have put it together in one place. Everything I learned living on that street, the habits, the philosophy, the things that never made it into any Western manual, I gathered into a book called Japanese Fix. If that is not enough, Deep Japanese goes further into the daily systems these households run without thinking and the full system puts it all together in one complete read. You will find them mentioned in the description below. They are the written version of everything this channel is about, and they exist because some knowledge is too layered to fit inside a single video. Now, back to where this knowledge lives in the everyday world, and why it matters who hands it to you. But I know what some of you are thinking right now, and I want to speak to you directly because you matter to me. Maybe you are sitting there thinking this is all fine for a man living in Japan with a patient neighbor and a warm garage, but you are older now, or your knees do not bend the way they used to, or you have never held a wrench in your life, and none of this feels like it is meant for you. I promise you it is. This next part was put together for exactly you, the person who assumes they have been left out. Because most of what I learned needs no lift, no pit, no special tools, and no crawling on the ground. It happens standing up in your own driveway with things you already own. Start with your headlights. If your car is more than a few years old, the plastic covers over your headlights have probably gone cloudy and yellow, and that haze does not just look old, it genuinely dims the light you drive by at night. I watched a young mechanic in the neighborhood restore a pair in 20 minutes with nothing but ordinary toothpaste, the plain white kind with a little grit in it, a soft cloth, and some water. He rubbed it over the plastic in small circles, kept it wet, wiped it clean, and the yellow came away like magic to reveal clear plastic underneath. It is the mild abrasive in the toothpaste polishing off the oxidized top layer. It costs almost nothing, and it makes an old car see the road like a young one again. Next, your wiper blades. I used to throw them away and buy new ones the moment they streaked. Tanaka's wife showed me better. She took a cloth dampened with a little rubbing alcohol or white vinegar and wiped the length of the rubber edge, and the black grime that came off was astonishing. That grime, baked on road film and old rubber, is what causes the streaking, not worn blades. Wipe them clean every few weeks, and a set of blades that should last one season lasts 3. She also lifted the blades off the glass and wiped the windshield itself with crumpled newspaper, which polishes the glass and leaves it slick so the wipers glide and the rain beads and rolls away. Then there is the winter trick that made me feel foolish for every frozen morning I had ever suffered. Your car door rubber seals, the soft strips around the doors, dry out and crack, and in the cold they freeze the door shut or tear when you yank it open. She rubbed a thin film of glycerin along those seals a couple of times a year, and it kept them soft, kept them from freezing, and kept them from cracking for years past when they normally would. A little candle wax or a silicone product does the same. It costs $1 or $2, and it saves you from a repair that runs into the hundreds when a seal fails and water gets into the door. While you are standing there, pop the hood because the battery terminals are the next easy win. If you see a white or greenish crust building up on the battery posts, that corrosion is quietly strangling the electricity your car needs to start. I watched them clean it off with an old toothbrush and a paste of baking soda and water, dried it, and then smeared a thin layer of ordinary petroleum jelly over the clean metal posts. That jelly seals out the air and moisture that caused the corrosion in the first place, so it does not come back. A car that struggled to start on cold mornings turned over instantly. No tools, no expertise, 10 minutes. And inside the car, the smallest thing of all. In that humid climate, the insides of cars can smell musty and the windows fog. Tanaka kept a small open container of charcoal, and his wife kept a little cloth bag of baking soda tucked under a seat. The charcoal and the soda quietly pull moisture and odor out of the air. No spray, no perfume, no chemical smell, just dry, clean air and a windshield that stayed clear. When the bag lost its power after a couple of months, she simply set it in the sun to dry it out and used it again. Do you see what I am telling you? Not one of those things required you to be young or strong or rich or a trained mechanic. Every one of them can be done this weekend by a person of any age, standing up with items already in the house. This is the knowledge that was allowed to slip away from us, and it was never complicated. It was only kept quiet. But I have saved the most surprising one for last, and it is the one I promised you at the very beginning, the trick from the snowy morning in Niigata. Niigata sits on the western coast of Japan, in the snow country, where the winters bury the roads and the mechanics have fought rust for generations. On a business trip up north, I spent a morning in a small garage run by a man whose family had serviced cars in that town since the 1960s. I told him about Mr. Tanaka's spotless 19-year-old car, and he smiled and said the paint is easy, the real war is underneath, where you never look, where the salt and the water eat the metal frame until one day the car is simply unsafe and worthless from below while it still shines on top. Then he showed me what his family had been doing for over half a century, a practice that predates every expensive rust-proofing package the dealers sell. In the autumn, before the first snow, he coated the underside of the car, the frame, the seams, the hidden metal in the wheel wells with a thin film of oil, not a special product. For decades, the workshops in that region used a light coat of ordinary oil, and today many use lanolin, the natural grease from sheep's wool, because it creeps into the tiny seams and clings there and never fully dries out. That oily film seals the bare and vulnerable metal away from water and salt and air. Water simply cannot touch what oil already covers. Rust cannot start where there is no moisture on the metal. He told me the secret is not the oil itself, but the timing and the seams. You do it once in the autumn, before the wet season, and you aim it into the folded seams and crevices where two pieces of metal meet, because that is where water hides and rust always begins, in the places you cannot see. A car treated that way every autumn will have a solid frame long after an untreated one has rotted through from below. That is how a plain sedan reaches 20 and 30 years and still passes inspection. Not luck, not money. A thin film of oil, applied once a year, into the hidden seams, by a family that never stopped doing the obvious thing everyone else forgot. I stood in that cold garage and I felt something close to grief, because I thought of all the cars I had thrown away, all the frames I had let quietly rot while I waxed the paint like a fool, all the money I had handed over because I believed a car was a thing that dies at 7 years. It is not. It dies when we stop caring for the parts we cannot see. And the cure was sitting in a can on a shelf in a small town garage the whole time. You do not need to live in the snow country to use this. You do not need to crawl under the car yourself if you cannot. You can take your car to any shop and ask them, in plain words, to apply a lanolin-based coating to the underbody in the autumn and to work it into the seams. It costs a fraction of what a new frame or a new car costs. It is the single most powerful thing I learned in 3 years, and it is the thing almost nobody in the West has ever been told, because a car that lasts 30 years is a car that nobody profits from replacing. So here is what I carried home from that quiet street and that cold garage. Not a gadget, not a secret part, a way of seeing. I learned that the machine in your driveway is not a mystery box you rent from strangers. It is a thing you can understand and tend and keep alive far longer than anyone ever told you was possible, with your own 2 hands and a handful of cheap and ordinary things. I think you already suspected this. I think you have felt for a long time that you were being sold the complicated and expensive version of something that used to be simple and cheap. You were right. You were right all along. The people who kept the simple version alive were not experts with special training. They were ordinary neighbors who never stopped paying attention in a country where paying attention was never allowed to die. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean this. Of everything I shared, which one surprised you the most? Was it the idling that harms the cold engine instead of helping it? Or was it the fuel tank kept half full to stop the rust growing inside it? Or was it the autumn coat of oil into the hidden seams underneath? Tell me in the comments, right now, in one line, because I read them and I answer them, and I want to know which forgotten habit you are going to try first this weekend. And if some part of you is tired of paying for the complicated version of a simple life, then come with me, because that is the whole reason this channel exists. We are a group of people quietly recovering the knowledge that was set aside, one habit at a time. Subscribe and stay close, because next time I am going to tell you about the way those same households kept food fresh for weeks without a modern refrigerator running day and night, using one cool, dark method that I watched with my own eyes and did not believe until I tasted it. You are going to want to be here for that one. I'll be honest, Everything I showed you was just the overview. Inside my membership, the Quiet Wisdom Circle, I pick up right where this video stopped and walk you through the full routine. You can ask me your own questions, and a real person, me, answers you myself. And you wouldn't be alone. So many mindful folks like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code. Cancel anytime.